Hello, and welcome to Stories for Sleep. Tonight, our journey takes us to an airport, but we will not be visiting the bright, bustling passenger terminals. Instead, we are going to a place that is just as vital, but far less seen. The vast, quiet world of the cargo hub. Imagine an airport at night, a place of cavernous buildings, low fluorescent lights, and the steady, methodical rhythm of loading and unloading the commerce of the world. It is a place of quiet, nocturnal work. Our story is set in such a place. The Lufthansa cargo terminal at John F. Kennedy International Airport in New York City, in the year 1978. It was a time when the city had a certain gritty glamour, and organized crime was a powerful, often unseen force. And through this cargo terminal, vast sums of untraceable cash and jewels were quietly moved each day. Tonight, we will recount the story of a crime so audacious, so lucrative, and so infamous that it would become a cornerstone of American Mafia law, a tale later immortalized in a classic film. But before the legend, there was the quiet, tense reality of the night itself. So, I invite you to settle in. Let the sounds of your world begin to fade. There is no need to feel the tension or the fear of the events to come. Simply allow the calm, steady recounting of the facts to be a gentle guide, leading you softly toward a state of rest. Segment 1. Inside the crime. Imagine yourself now. It is just after 3 o'clock in the morning, on a cold and dark December night in 1978. You are a cargo agent for Lufthansa, working the late shift at JFK Airport. The vast cargo building is mostly quiet, filled with the low hum of the fluorescent lights and the faint, metallic scent of jet fuel and cardboard. Your work is routine, a familiar rhythm of paperwork and procedure, a quiet watch over the sleeping commerce of the world. The quiet is broken by a sound. It is not an explosion, but a sharp, metallic crunch from the perimeter fence, followed by the sound of a vehicle approaching too quickly. Before there is time to react, a black Ford Econoline van rolls to a stop in the loading bay. The doors slide open, and several figures, their faces obscured by ski masks, emerge into the dim light. They move with a quiet, disciplined purpose. There is no shouting, no alarms, just a sudden, silent intrusion into your ordinary night. One of the figures approaches you. You see the cold glint of a handgun. There is no negotiation. A firm hand is on your shoulder, and you are told that if you cooperate, no one will be harmed. The fear is a cold, quiet dread, a sense of unreality. Your professional training gives way to the simple, primal need to comply with the quiet, firm instructions. You and your handful of colleagues are gathered together. One of the masked men, clearly the leader, directs you towards the high-security vault. It is a two-door system, a cage of steel designed to protect the millions of dollars in untraceable cash and valuables that pass through the terminal. He asks you to open it. Your hands, perhaps trembling slightly, move through the familiar sequence of entering the codes and turning the keys. The heavy door swings open with a low groan, revealing the vault's contents. Stacks of currency in sealed boxes and bags filled with jewels. The work of the robbers begins. It is a study in quiet efficiency. They form a human chain, passing the heavy boxes and bags from the vault, out of the building, and into the waiting van. Their movements are swift and economical, their communication little more than hand gestures and muffled whispers. You are made to watch, a silent, helpless observer to an unbelievable event unfolding in the sterile, quiet environment of your workplace. The entire operation is conducted in a state of near-perfect, disciplined silence. In just over an hour, the work is complete. The van is loaded with a fortune. The leader of the group gives a final, quiet warning. Do not call the police for at least 15 minutes. Then, as silently as they arrived, they get back into the van. The van disappears into the night. The sound of its engine fades, leaving only the low hum of the terminal's lights. You and your colleagues are left standing in the cold air of the violated vault, surrounded by a profound and sudden silence. The quiet, almost silent efficiency of the robbery was no accident. It was not the work of impulsive amateurs. It was the hallmark of its planner, a man who operated with precision and foresight in the shadows of New York's criminal underworld. To understand the crime, we must turn our attention to its architect, a man named James Burke, known in his circles as Jimmy the Gent. Jimmy Burke was a legendary figure in his own right, a highly successful and deeply feared associate of the Lucchese crime family. Due to his Irish heritage, he could never be formally inducted or made member of the Italian-American Mafia, but his intelligence, his earning capacity, and his capacity for utter ruthlessness made him one of the most respected and powerful criminals in the city. His nickname, The Gent was a study in contrasts. It was said to have been given to him because he was always impeccably dressed, and because he had a habit of politely tipping the drivers of the trucks he had just hijacked. This quiet, gentlemanly demeanor, however, concealed a cold and calculating mind. The plan for the Lufthansa heist did not originate with Burke himself, but came to him as an opportunity. The seed of the idea was planted by a Lufthansa cargo employee named Louis Werner, a man with heavy gambling debts. Werner knew firsthand of the millions of dollars in untraceable American currency that were flown in each month from Germany, a result of currency exchanges for military and tourist personnel. He knew how it was stored, and he knew the terminal security protocols were surprisingly lax. Desperate for money, Werner passed this information to his bookmaker, a man named Martin Krugman. Krugman, realizing the score was far too big for him to handle, brought the tip to the one man he knew who could orchestrate such a massive undertaking, Jimmy Burke. For Burke, this was the opportunity of a lifetime. It was a simple, elegant plan with an immense potential payoff. He began the slow, methodical work of putting the pieces in place. He debriefed the insider Werner, extracting every last detail. The layout of cargo building 261, the precise location of the high security vault, the names of the few employees who would be on the night shift, and the best time to strike, which was in the dead of night, shortly after the cash had arrived. Burke then assembled his team. He deliberately chose a crew of lower-level associates and specialists, men who were not high on the FBI's radar. The team was led on site by a man named Tommy Decimer, a notoriously violent and unpredictable figure, but the plan itself was Burke's creation. He would not be present at the airport on the night of the crime. He would remain in the shadows, a quiet puppet master, managing the operation from a distance, with the insider's knowledge providing a perfect blueprint and a hand-picked team ready to act on his command. Jimmy Burke had transformed a simple tip from a desperate gambler into a plan for the largest cash robbery in the history of the United States. He remained unseen, unheard, as his crew rolled towards the sleeping cargo terminal on that cold December night. In the days and weeks immediately following the robbery, the members of the crew were euphoric. They were rich beyond their wildest dreams, in possession of a life-changing score. They believed they had committed the perfect crime, but this euphoria would prove to be fleeting and dangerous. As the mastermind of the heist, Jimmy Burke began a new, far darker phase of his plan. Burke was a man known for his deep-seated paranoia. The massive media attention on the heist, and the sheer number of people who knew details about the crime, made him intensely nervous. He believed that the only way to ensure the secret remained kept was to eliminate anyone who could possibly talk. His solution, born of a cold and ruthless logic, was to erase the witnesses, starting with the members of his own team. The unraveling began with a simple, foolish mistake. The man tasked with disposing of the getaway van, a musician named Parnell Stacks Edwards, failed to do so. Instead of taking the van to be crushed at a scrapyard in New Jersey as planned, he left it in a no-parking zone, where it was discovered by police just 2 days after the heist. His fingerprints and those of other gang members were found inside. Stacks Edwards was the first loose end. Several days after the heist, he was found in his apartment, his life brought to a sudden and violent end. He had become a liability, and he was the first to pay the price for Burke's paranoia. This was only the beginning. As the weeks turned into months, the circle of those connected to the heist began to shrink in a slow, terrifying purge. Men who had celebrated their newfound wealth began to disappear. The money they had stolen had become a curse. Martin Krugman, the bookmaker who had first brought the tip to Burke, vanished without a trace, his association with the heist ending not with a payout, but with his own permanent disappearance. Other members of the team met similar fates, their lives cut short in a methodical campaign to ensure their silence. The great prize from the vault had become a poison for the remaining members of the crew. Each knock on the door, each unfamiliar car on the street, could signal the end. The bonds of their criminal conspiracy had dissolved, completely replaced by a deep and isolating fear. The police were still struggling to solve the initial crime of the robbery, but now they were faced with a second, shadow investigation. They were chasing a series of murders and disappearances that all seemed to be connected, a quiet, internal war being waged in the criminal underworld. The central mystery was no longer simply who stole the money, but who would survive the architect of the crime. The Lufthansa heist was a single night of audacious theft, but its aftermath was a long, slow season of quiet retribution, as Jimmy Burke began to methodically erase his own masterpiece. The wave of violence and disappearances orchestrated by Jimmy Burke had one unintended consequence. It made those who were still alive desperate, and in the world of organized crime, a desperate man is often a talkative one. The key to breaking the Lufthansa case would come from a man who was on the inside, a man who rightly feared he was next on Burke's list. His name was Henry Hill. Hill was a long-time associate of Jimmy Burke and his crew. While not a primary participant in the heist itself, he was deeply involved in the world in which it took place and knew all the key players. In 1980, facing a lengthy prison sentence on unrelated drug trafficking charges, and knowing that Burke's paranoid purge was likely to include him, Hill made a decision. He became a federal witness. His testimony was the breakthrough the FBI had been waiting for. He laid out the entire story in meticulous detail. The initial tip, Burke's role as the mastermind, the identities of the crew members, and most importantly, the grim, inside account of the series of murders that followed. Hill's words broke the Mafia's code of silence and gave the authorities the evidence they needed to finally close in on Jimmy Burke. As a result of this testimony, several surviving conspirators were arrested, and Jimmy Burke was eventually convicted, not for the heist itself, but for one of the murders he committed in its aftermath. He would spend the rest of his life in prison, the brilliant architect of the perfect robbery ultimately undone by his own paranoia. The story, with its cast of memorable characters, its audacious plot, and its bloody, paranoid conclusion, was almost cinematic in scope. It was perhaps inevitable then that it would attract the attention of Hollywood. The story of Henry Hill and the Lufthansa heist became the basis for the 1990 film Goodfellas, directed by Martin Scorsese. The film, based on the book Wise Guy by Nicholas Pileggi, which was written with Hill's full cooperation, became a cinematic masterpiece. It provided a meticulous and now classic depiction of the lifestyle, the allure, and the ultimate brutal downfall of this particular Mafia crew, immortalizing the characters of Jimmy Burke and his associates in the popular imagination. Despite the arrests and the celebrated film, however, parts of the story remain a mystery. The vast majority of the nearly $6 million stolen was never recovered. It vanished, spent, laundered, or hidden away, a ghost fortune from a legendary crime. The Lufthansa heist is, in the end, a story that is both simpler and far more complex than the movies. It was a single night of audacious, brilliantly planned theft, which then spiraled into a long and tragic aftermath of paranoia, betrayal, and murder. It serves as a stark and quiet examination of the dark, self-destructive reality that lay beneath the romanticized surface of the Mafia's so-called golden age. But the gritty streets of that 1972 New York are a distant world now. The frantic energy of that life, and the cold paranoia that consumed it, have faded into a quiet, historical record, a story told in books and films. Here, in the stillness of your room, all is calm. There are no secrets to be kept, and no betrayals to fear. The case is closed. The story has been told. Let the echoes of that violent past fade away into the quiet of the night. All that is left now is the stillness and the gentle invitation to sleep. Sleep now.